This video is the gameplay follow-up to the Swordsoul guide that I made about a week ago. Hopefully through my commentary, you can learn something playing as or against Swordsoul. This is the build of Swordsoul that I was running in the games where I played as Swordsoul, though the ratios changed slightly over my recordings. Ironically, I never actually went for the Hauk line in any of the games that made it into this video, mainly because in games that I went for the Hauk line, there were a lot of people that kind of just scooped it up when the Auroradon came down, and those aren't really interesting to show. So this first game is going to be a Swordsoul mirror match where we are going second. My opponent opens pretty strong. They lead with a long one into Baronne de Fleur to insulate their place from any hand traps. They do the basic Swordsoul combo, they search a blackout, and their board is pretty strong. So let's break it down before we make a play. Shisha negates anything on the field, Baron is an omni-negate, and blackout can pop 2 of our cards. They also have 2 unknowns, 1 in the hand and 1 in the back row. My read on the set card is either infinite impermanence or Called by the Grave. If I go Vishuda, make Monk to force out the Baronne, Called by is a pretty massive punish, but I have a way to play around it. I could use my crossout to stop the Called by, but that would get negated by Baronne. I just kind of wanted to make the most value out of my cards, so I use Ashuna to make Monk, and I use Vishuda's effect from the hand instead of the grave to force out the Baronne de Fleur. He can't Called by my Vishuda if it's never actually in the grave. So I have 2 options here. I have a Tenyi line into Shishao, or I could use the same Tenyi cards to go into Halka Fibrax. Going into Halk forces the Shisha negate, and Shishao actually forces out both the opponent's Shishao and their blackouts. So if I go into Shishao, they're kind of forced to negate this because their own Shishao is dying soon anyways, so they're just going to get their interaction out of the way. If I go to battle phase, my Shishao threatens turning their blackout offline because they're not going to have any worms to tribute if I trade mine with his. So they black out here, they take my Shishao and my Monk, which is perfectly fine. My Shishao traded for their own Shishao's negate and a blackout. I think that's insane value. Afterwards, I go for Ecclesia's effect, and my read was 100% correct. The set card was a Called by, and I'm really feeling myself here as the Moye comes down. And then I get Gamled, which negates and destroys my Moye. So, I make a huge misplay here. I kind of molded into chaining Max C, thinking I got 2 draws off the Gamma summon, but you only get 1. I get kinda saved by getting an infinite impermanence at least, but this was a massive, massive misplay. I definitely should have saved the Maxi for their turn. And to get properly punished for this misplay, they top deck an emergence and get a Taya. My impermanence can't actually stop the Taya because they banish the blackout for cost, which is going to get a token even if I negate the Taya. So I'm forced to save my imperm for their Shishao. They're going to use an Ashuna to get a Tenyi out of the deck. Now, if they were running Shutana here, they could have extended their combo and gotten another 8 or something, but they just get out Adhara, who just kind of sits there. On the draw, we pick up a Deskbot 001, which usually sucks, but right now it's ironically exactly what we need. We're going to have to Vishuda to bounce his Shishao. My opponent has a kind of a Giga Brain play here. He negates the effect of his own dude to banish his Taya. With the Taya banished, it means if he top decks any Tenyi monster and can make Monk on the field, he can add back that Taya with his Adhara, which is about to be in the grave, to extend next turn. But we're going to play around this. His interaction is gone right now, so I'm going to go ahead and grab a Vishuda out of deck with my Ashuna's effect, then normal summon my Deskbot 001 to make an 8. I decide to go for Boxia to keep Adhara out of the grave, and my original intention was, okay, I can blow up Boxia, get my Ecclesia out of the grave, and keep comboing. Completely forgetting that merely seconds ago, I had just wormlocked myself by activating Ashuna's effect. So, I end up getting this Moye, who's just sitting here awkwardly on the field. This is a pretty big misplay. If he did top deck a Taya or any Tenyi, I might have been in trouble, but it looks like he drew into a Moye or a hand trap, so he just sets it and passes. So to clean up this board state, we can get the Ecclesia for real with Boxia, make a second Boxia, and just shuffle back whatever it is, and just swing for lethal. For this game, we're going second against Dinosaurs. So there's a few important notes on hand-trapping Dinosaurs that I want to go over here. You never ever want to hand-trap either Fossil Dig or any of their on-field dinosaurs like our boy Soul Eating Oviraptor over here. The logic behind not hand-trapping Fossil Dig is twofold. First off, it's like Emergence. If you hand-trap it and your opponent still has a starter or extender or whatever they were going to search off of it, you've just wasted one of your points of interaction on a card that they didn't need to resolve to play the game. The second is that Fossil Dig is a non-once per turn, so if they have multiple, they can just power through your negation. For the on-field dinosaurs, you don't want to hand-trap these because of Dinosaur's archetypal hand-trap, Miscellaneousaurus. Misk is a hand trap that can be discarded during either player's turn as a quick effect. What he does is he gives all dinosaurs on the field immunity from your opponent's card effects for the entire turn. So if I used these imperms in my opening hand here to stop the Oviraptor, he would have been able to chain the Miscellaneousaurus in his hand to negate my imperm basically. This imperm ends up being incredibly valuable for breaking his board in the crackback though, so we are absolutely rewarded for holding these. Now for what you actually should hand trap. The big one is Miscellaneousaurus's Graveyard effect. The reason why you can do this is Miscellaneous' protection only covers dinosaurs that are on the field, and Misk's second effect banishes itself from the graveyard to special summon a dino from deck. If you have Ash, now's the time to use it. If you have Called by the Grave, you want to do this before Misk banishes itself because Misk banishes itself as part of its cost. We, however, have a Max C, so we can hopefully use it to stop his play, and this game quickly becomes a cautionary tale as to why Max C is incredibly broken and you need to respect it. And this is his end board. Let's see if it was worth us drawing half our deck. Psyframe Lord Lambda is the Link monster. Lambda lets you get more value out of a certain hand trap. You might be familiar with Psyframe Gear Gamma. Gamma lets you negate and destroy a monster when they activate their effect, from anywhere, not just on the field, with the stipulation that you can only activate Gamma if you control no monsters. Lambda bypasses this restriction by letting you activate Gamma's effect even if you still control monsters. Overtext Coatlus is a spell and trap negate, provided that you destroy a card on your field to do it. Ultimate Conductor Tyranno also activates his effect by destroying a card on the field, but his effect is to flip all of your monsters face down. Dolka is a non-once per turn monster negate and destroy. He can activate this effect as long as he has Xyz materials to detach. This card over here is Baby Ceratosaurus, and he is what will be getting destroyed by Tyranno and Coatlus to activate their effects. When Baby Ceratosaurus is destroyed by a card effect, he can special summon a dinosaur from deck. We found it in Nibiru in the 50 cards that we drew from our deck when he passes it back to us. His dinosaurs are still protected from something like Nibiru, but Dolka and Lambda aren't dinosaurs. We're certainly not activating Nibiru on our turn, so we can fire it off here just to force out one of Dolka's negates. Now when it rolls over to our turn, we have two of our imperms saved. It's very important that we activate these during the standby phase or the draw phase. One stipulation to Misk's protection is that it only applies to dinosaurs during the main phase. So if we can negate these dinosaurs before the main phase, he can't actually protect them with Misk if he has it in his hand. As we go to negate the Coatlus, he ends up making a pretty good play here. He Max C's before we actually negate his Coatlus, and we can't cross out Designator this because he can just negate it with the Coatlus. Our crossout's still good because it's going to insulate us from any hand traps that he draws with Max C, but it's worth noting this was a pretty good play on his part. So we've handled the Tyranno and the Coatlus before the main phase has even started, now onto breaking the rest of his board. We are under Max C, so we do have to win this turn or we just lose. The first thing we have to do is force out that last Dolka negate, which we can easily do with our Vishuda. Now, after I do this, I do think that I misplayed a bit here. I should have used Emergence to get long one and immediately made Baron de Fleur to 100% insulate myself from hand traps. I do have the crossout, so I am safe from Nibiru, but Valor plus Nibiru could win him the game if I didn't have Baron on the field. Instead, I try to stop Nibiru and Valor in a more convoluted way. Before committing to my Taya, I drop my Adhara. As I drop the Taya, it's going to go ahead and make a Yazi. I pop his Lambda before he draws the Gamma and get a Moya from deck to extend. Boxia shuffles the Baby Ceratosaurus back into the deck instead of destroying it, so it doesn't summon a conga line of dinosaurs protecting him from lethal. Then we're going to use the Adhara with our Boxia to make Chao Fang. Because Chao Fang was made with a light Yang Zing, so Boxia, my opponent can't even attempt to Nibiru or Valor me from this point on because they're both light monsters. I end up making Baron a bit later than I should have, but from here out, we're completely insulated from any hand traps he could throw at us. We need another Synchro 8 to clean up this board and swing for lethal, but we've already used all of our Swordsoul effects. We do have an Ashuna live in the graveyard, but we can't get a level 4 tuner for our Taya. We can, however, get another body on the field with this Ashuna for a Link summon. Shaman of the Tenyi only requires any 2 worm monsters, and we'll be using this with Baron and Chao Fang to find another Synchro 8 play. Chao Fang has kind of a niche effect that doesn't come up that often. If you destroy a monster on your opponent's side of the field, you can special summon a worm from your deck with the same attribute. Ultimate Conductor Tyranno happens to be a light, which matches Ashuna. We can use Baron de Fleur's destruction effect to proc Chao Fang, and get a 7 on our board. We can then use Shaman to bring back Adhara from our graveyard, giving us the level 1 tuner that we need for the Synchro 8. We make Draco Berserker of the Tenyi, which lets us easily clean up his board and swing for lethal damage. He ends up finding the Miscellaneousaurus, but I don't think it mattered. If he dropped this Miscellaneousaurus at any point, we still could have played through his board. So for this game, we're going to be going up first against Eldlich, which is not going to be as good as it seems. We have full combo, backed up by Called By and Max C, which is, admittedly it's kind of a high roll hand. Unfortunately, we're against Eldlich, and he ends up blowing up our board with a single Lava Golem, and he sets 4 and passes. On the draw, I pick up another Called By, and my immediate plan is that because I have these Called Bys, I can use the Lava Golem to force out Eldlich and get him in the grave, hopefully trying to set him off the Golden Boy permanently. As good as Called By is in this matchup, neither of these actually help me win the game, and they only resolve after I've already won. I go to swing with the Lava Golem right here because if it connects, I put him on a 2-turn timer. My main goal here is to force out some kind of back row, and I do force 2 out. I force out the Eld Dog and an Eldlich. I normal my Adhara here to make a Chow Fang with a Lava Golem. I do this because if he destroys it with Conquistador, I get to search a tuner from Chow Fang's effect, and if he tries to get rid of it from Eldlich's effect, I can Call By the Eldlich and gain some tempo. But when his turn rolls around, he's going to fire off an Ice Dragon's Prison to banish both my Chow Fang and my Vishuda. Chow Fang's not destroyed, so I don't get to search a tuner, and I don't have Vishuda to force out his back row for next turn. So here's his board. We actually have a lot of information here. We know that the card under the Link Spider is Golden Land Forever, which is an Omni-Negate by tributing any zombie monster on his side of the field. We also know that one of his 2 new sets is Huaquero, because he searched it with Outland. We also know that his last card in hand is an Eldlich, and not any kind of hand trap that could disrupt us, because he searched this turn 1 and it still hasn't come into play. We also have one of his 2 unknown sets being checked by Imperm, so there's only one actual unknown card that we're dealing with here, so we can adjust our line accordingly. Before we commit to our Swordsoul plays, we want to force out that Omni-Negate and Golden Land Forever with our Vishudas ideally. Now there's 2 ways for us to get to Vishuda. There's one in our Banish pile that we can get back with an Adhara, and there's one from our deck that we can get with an Ashuna that's in our hand. Either way, we're going to need a normal monster on the field to do this. So we're going to get this Ashuna from our hand on the field, but once we make the Monk, he's going to try to destroy with Conquistador before we can actually activate any of our graveyard effects. Earlier in the game, I'd set an Imperm in the same column as the Conquistador though, so we can just go ahead and stop that for our push. He tries to stop me with the Huaquero, but he quickly realizes that there's no good targets for it. If he banishes the Ashuna, I can get back the banished Vishuda with my Adhara. If he banishes the Adhara, I can get a Vishuda from deck with the Ashuna. So either way, I get the Vishuda and I can force out his Golden Land Forever. There's one last unknown set to deal with, but it doesn't appear to be anything, so I'm just going off with my normal Swordsoul plays, and I eventually get to forcing out the last back row with Baxia. He chains the Sanguine to that, but now I know he has no more interaction. I get back a Vishuda to reveal for Moye, and go for a Shisha so I can get my long one. Long one's burn, and Chenying is going to be more than enough to get lethal damage, but I Called By the Grave for comedy factor. Even if he drew his really broken floodgates, besides like maybe Vanities or Imperial Order, I think this game was still in the bag because I could set him off his Eldliches permanently with my 2 Called Bys. So this last game is going to be me playing pure Zoodiac up against Swordsoul. He leads with a Moye that I can either stop with Gamma or Imperm. Imperm is 100% the correct choice here, because they could follow up with a long one that could only be stopped with a Gamma, but the long one can't be stopped with the Imperm. Turns out he does have the long one to extend, which we are just going to fire the Gamma off on. The only caution I have to firing the Gamma here is that if he had an Ecclesia, summoning Gamma here could meet the conditions for Ecclesia to extend. Thankfully, he didn't high roll that hard and he doesn't have an Ecclesia in hand. When it comes over to me, I'm going to clear the Moye and go for a Zeus line with 2 activations, only to get hit by Nibiru as the Zeus comes down. We're going to set a Called By, and as it goes back to him, he's going to fire off an Emergence to pick up a Moye. He gets real greedy here, summoning the Moye and revealing that his other card is Taya. If he summoned the Taya, both the Taya and the Moye would have been punished if the set card was an Imperm, but only Moye is punished if my set card is a Called By the Grave. Because he wanted the Moye draw that badly, he ended up giving me a massive tempo swing. My hand is unfortunately all Zoodiac, which is what I get for playing garbage like Kataroost, and I know his last card in hand is Taya. I decide to go for a Utopic Draco Future line, but Dryden might have been better here because it covers the 10E top decks easier than UDF does. His last turn, he picks up an Emergence. We're free to Ash this because we know that his last card is a Taya, and we are easily able to swing it for lethal next turn. That's it for this video, and I wanted to thank you all so much for making my first guide insanely successful. I literally couldn't even imagine the almost 50k views it's at right now with the incredibly positive response in the comments. It's legitimately a little overwhelming. I still haven't decided on what guide I'm making next. I'm 100% going to be doing both Floanderies and the Adventure Engine when they come out, as well as the Despia deck when they get their new support cards like Branded Fusion that we already have in the TCG. I want to do a deck that's already in the meta next while we wait for these new cards. And going by the comments, I'm leaning towards either Tri-Brigade Zoodiac and Tri-Brigade Lyrilisk, Sky Striker, or Invoke Dogmatica Shaddoll. Right now, it looks like Tri-Brigade is the most likely, but hopefully next week I'll have something to actually show for it. Thank you all for watching so much, I'll see you next time.